Around 20,000 years ago, much of the Northern Hemisphere sits under conditions so cold that entire landscapes become almost unrecognizable. Vast ice sheets press across continents. Temperatures in some inhabited regions fall far below anything most people today would willingly experience without insulated walls. Central heating, weather forecasts, and a heroic quantity of hot tea. And yet, you are here. Not you personally, thankfully. Your evening is probably less dramatic. But imagine stepping into the body of an ancient human standing near the edge of the frozen world. The air bites the inside of your nose. Your fingers stiffen quickly when uncovered. Snow squeaks beneath your feet. Somewhere beyond the low horizon, wind slides across open ground without a tree, building, or polite little coffee shop to interrupt it. There is no thermostat. There is no emergency service. There is no supermarket full of food produced somewhere warmer. There is only what you know, what your companions know, and what the landscape is willing to give you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. Perhaps you're somewhere genuinely cold tonight, or perhaps you're comfortably warm while imagining a wind that once swept across the mammoth country. Now, dim the lights and allow that modern room around you to soften. Your mind drifts back into a world where winter does not simply mean a colder season. Winter can decide whether your family continues into spring. The first thing you notice is the silence. A frozen plain absorbs sound differently. Snow muffles distant movement. Then, suddenly, a gust rushes past your ears and the silence disappears beneath a low, restless roar. You smell cold earth, old smoke clinging to animal hides, and the faint oily scent of fat carried on clothing. You're living during what modern researchers call the last glacial maximum, a particularly cold phase of the last ice age. It reaches its harshest conditions roughly 26,000 to 19,000 years ago. Records from ice cores, sediments, pollen, and ancient shorelines confirm that enormous volumes of water are trapped in glaciers during this period. Sea levels stand dramatically lower than they do today. Regions now separated by ocean are connected by exposed land. The planet you know has been rearranged. Northern Europe looks nothing like the green patchwork of forests and farmland familiar today. Large areas are covered by ice. South of the Great Ice Sheet stretches tundra and cold grassland, sometimes called Mammoth Steppe. It is a strange ecosystem. You might imagine endless snow, but that is not quite right. Much of this environment is dry. The cold locks moisture away. Winds sweep over broad grasslands populated by animals astonishing in both size and number. Mammoths move through the distance like walking hills. Reindeer travel in herds. Woolly rhinoceroses scrape through snow. Wild horses move across the open ground. Bison feed where grasses remain accessible. Predators follow them. So do you. Ancient humans are not simply victims trapped inside an icy nightmare. That idea makes a dramatic movie trailer, but it misses something important. You belong here because generations before you have learned how to belong here. Your body helps, of course. Humans can adjust somewhat to cold conditions. Blood circulation changes. Metabolism can respond. People who live for generations in cold regions may develop biological adaptations, but biology alone is not enough. You do not grow thick fur. You do not hibernate. You do not possess the magnificent insulation of a mammoth, which seems frankly unfair when you consider how much effort humans later spend sewing mammoth-adjacent materials around themselves. Your greatest adaptation exists somewhere else. It exists in knowledge. Someone knows where animals cross a valley. Someone remembers which hillside blocks the north wind. Someone recognizes clouds that signal worsening weather. Someone understands when a frozen river is safe. Someone knows which plants remain edible beneath snow. Someone remembers where fuel can still be collected when the landscape looks empty. None of this knowledge needs to be written down. It lives inside people. That makes survival social. You are not wandering alone like a heroic figure in an adventure story. Solitude in this landscape is rarely heroic. It is usually inconvenient for a short while and then extremely dangerous. Groups matter. Children learn by watching adults. Adults depend on one another. Older people may possess memories of routes, animals, storms, and seasonal patterns that younger hunters have never experienced. A cold world rewards memory. It also punishes arrogance. You cannot simply announce that you are tougher than winter. Winter does not care. Your feet are one problem. Your hands are another. Wet clothing becomes dangerous. Wind removes heat rapidly. Hunger weakens your ability to stay warm. Injury makes ordinary tasks much harder. Even small mistakes can grow. A lost tool means more work. A missed hunt means less food. A soaked sleeping place means a miserable night. Several miserable nights can become a crisis. This is why ancient survival is rarely about one spectacular invention. It is about dozens of ordinary decisions made correctly, again and again. Oddly enough, one of the most important advantages humans possess may be their ability to complain productively. Not literally in any language you would recognize, of course, but conversation, warning, teaching, planning, and social negotiation allow information to move between people. Someone says the herd has shifted. Someone notices the wind changing. Someone remembers a better route. Someone objects to a dangerous plan. Congratulations. You have invented the ancient version of a group chat, except ignoring it may result in being eaten by a cave lion. Language almost certainly plays an enormous role in cold weather adaptation, although scholars bicker over exactly when fully modern language develops and how complex communication becomes among different human populations. The debate is especially interesting because you are not always the only kind of human in the landscape. In parts of Eurasia, Homo sapiens encounters Neanderthals. Neanderthals have already survived cold and unstable climates for hundreds of thousands of years. Their bodies are strongly built, with proportions that conserve heat more effectively than long, slender forms. They hunt large animals. They control fire. They produce sophisticated stone tools. They care for injured members of their communities. The old stereotype of the clumsy caveman stumbling through snow deserves to be quietly placed outside with the rubbish. These are capable humans, and yet Neanderthals eventually disappear, while Homo sapiens populations continue expanding across much of the world. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether climate pressure plays a major role in that disappearance, or whether competition, population size, disease, interbreeding, social networks, and simple demographic bad luck matter more. There is probably no single neat explanation. History rarely gives you one. For now, what matters is that extreme cold does not eliminate humans. Instead, it changes what successful human life looks like. You begin to notice time differently. Summer is not merely pleasant weather. Summer is preparation. Autumn is not simply beautiful. Autumn is warning. You watch migrating animals because their movement predicts future food. You notice daylight shrinking. You pay attention to the angle of the sun. You learn when certain valleys become dangerous. You learn when rivers freeze. You learn which campsites will soon become useless. The landscape becomes a calendar. There are no printed months pinned to a wall. Seasonal knowledge comes through repeated observation. A curious footnote appears in the archaeological record through the distances that materials sometimes travel. Stones suitable for tools can be carried or exchanged across surprisingly large regions. Shells and decorative objects also move far from their original sources. This suggests that ancient communities are not always isolated little bands staring suspiciously into the snow. Some belong to wider networks. Those networks may become vital when conditions deteriorate. If one area fails, another group may know a better hunting ground. If a tool breaks, Someone elsewhere may possess suitable material. If local resources disappear, social relationships can become a kind of invisible survival equipment. You cannot wear friendship like fur, but it may save your life just as effectively. And winter keeps testing those relationships. Picture evening approaching. The temperature falls quickly. Your exposed skin begins to ache. People gather closer together. Children are kept near adults. Tools are checked. Food is divided. You listen to voices as darkness spreads. Perhaps someone tells a story. Perhaps that story contains practical information disguised as memory. A dangerous river, a generous valley, an animal encountered near a ridge, a storm from years ago. Myth, memory, and survival knowledge can sit comfortably together. For an ancient listener, a good story may be entertaining, meaningful, and useful all at once. There is something reassuring in that. The people around you are not waiting helplessly for warmer weather. They are constantly reading the world. They observe animal behavior. They track seasonal changes. They choose when to move and when to remain. They share skills. They teach children. They care for people who cannot contribute equally every day. Fossil evidence shows individuals surviving serious injuries and long-term physical limitations. That survival strongly suggests assistance from others. A badly injured person does not hunt effectively. Someone must provide food. Someone must provide protection. Someone must tolerate the ancient equivalent of a housemate who cannot take their turn with the chores. Caregiving, then, is not a sentimental extra. It is part of survival. The colder the environment becomes, the more valuable cooperation can be. You begin to understand that the famous struggle against the Ice Age is not really humans versus cold. It is humans learning not to face cold individually. That distinction matters. Your intelligence is distributed across the group. One person knows animals, another knows stone, another recognizes plants, another remembers distant terrain, another calms children, another notices weather changes before anyone else. Survival emerges from the network between them. Outside, the wind continues across the plain. You hear it press against the landscape with patient force. The cold seems endless, but nearby are other people, each carrying a small collection of remembered solutions. No single solution defeats winter. Together, they make winter survivable. And as night settles over the frozen grasslands, you can imagine the ancient world becoming quieter. Footsteps cease. Voices lower. The enormous animals beyond the camp become shadows against a pale horizon. The cold remains. It always remains. Yet humanity remains too. Not because ancient people are immune to suffering, and not because survival is easy, but because each season adds another layer of knowledge to the generations that follow. You allow that thought to settle slowly. The wind grows softer in your imagination. The wide plain darkens. The movement of distant herds fades into the night. Around you there is only the steady presence of other people, the familiar scent of worn hides, the muted sound of breathing, and the deep awareness that tomorrow will require attention, patience, and memory. For now, though, darkness offers a little stillness. Your shoulders loosen. The frozen horizon disappears, and somewhere beneath all that ancient cold, human knowledge continues quietly from one person to another, carrying life through another winter night. The first thing you notice is the smell of smoke. It clings to everything. Your hair carries it. Your clothing carries it. The walls around you hold it. Even your food tastes faintly of it, which is not exactly gourmet dining. But in a frozen landscape you are unlikely to complain. A small fire glows in front of you. It does not look impressive. There is no roaring bonfire, no theatrical tower of flames reaching toward the sky. Fuel is too valuable for that kind of performance. What matters is control. A fire that burns gently through the night can be far more useful than a dramatic blaze that devours every available branch in an hour. You crouch close enough to feel heat against your hands. The difference between the warm side of your body and the cold side is immediate. Turn your face toward the flames and your cheeks loosen. Turn away and the chill returns. Fire is not simply comfort. It changes what parts of the world are available to you. With fire, food can be cooked, wet material can be dried, dangerous darkness becomes less absolute, tools can be worked under light, predators may hesitate at the edge of a camp. Most importantly, on a bitter winter night, fire allows people to create a tiny artificial climate where none naturally exists. Records confirm that humans and earlier hominins used controlled fire long before the coldest phases of the last ice age, though exactly when habitual fire use begins remains debated. By the time humans are living deep inside Ice Age Eurasia, fire is thoroughly woven into daily life. But knowing how to use fire and being able to maintain one are very different problems. Your modern instinct might be to reach for a lighter. Nothing happens. There is no lighter. There are no matches. There is certainly no cheerful box of fire starters purchased beside a supermarket barbecue display. You possess materials, technique, patience, and experience. That is enough. But only if you know what you are doing. A flame can be created from sparks or friction under suitable conditions. Yet producing fire in freezing weather can be difficult. Damp tinder refuses to cooperate. Wind steals heat. Numb fingers become clumsy. So you develop another strategy. You do not always start from nothing. You preserve what already exists. Hot embers can remain alive under ash for surprisingly long periods. A carefully tended hearth may be revived after hours of apparent quiet. Glowing material can sometimes be carried between camps if wrapped or protected correctly. This makes fire less like a disposable tool and more like a living responsibility. Someone watches it, someone feeds it, someone notices when the glow is weakening. If everyone assumes someone else has done this, morning may become unpleasant. You can almost imagine the silent ancient accusation when a sleeping group discovers that the final ember has died. No one needs to say anything. Everyone knows. The person responsible is probably having a very bad morning. Fuel becomes the constant challenge. In a dense modern forest, wood seems obvious. On a cold steppe, it may not be. Much Ice Age terrain is open, windy, and treeless. Shrubs may be scarce. Fallen branches may exist only in sheltered valleys or along rivers. What looks like an endless landscape can contain surprisingly little convenient firewood. You begin looking at the ground differently. Small twigs matter. Dry grasses matter. Low shrubs matter. Old roots matter. Anything that can burn steadily becomes worth noticing. People may collect fuel long before darkness arrives because waiting until you're cold is a poor strategy. Your hands feel the roughness of dry stems. You test pieces of wood. Wet material is separated from dry material. Good fuel is protected from snow. Some pieces are saved for later. Fire management becomes an exercise in budgeting. You have warmth now, but how much warmth can you afford at midnight? How much remains for dawn? The question becomes even more important in environments where wood is scarce. Oddly enough, animal dung can become extremely useful. Dry dung from large herbivores can burn. To a modern listener, this may sound like the moment history becomes less glamorous than expected. Yet across many treeless environments, dry dung has served as fuel for thousands of years. Imagine following a herd and discovering that the animals have left behind both tracks and heating supplies. It is not elegant. It works. On open steppe, where mammoths, horses, reindeer, and bison move across vast distances, combustible materials can appear in forms that would never occur to someone accustomed to wooded landscapes. Bones may also contribute under certain conditions, especially when they retain fat, although bone alone does not behave like ordinary firewood. Archaeological hearths sometimes contained burned bone fragments. Scholars bicker over how often prehistoric people deliberately use bone as fuel, rather than simply discarding bones into existing fires. The distinction sounds small, but it changes how you picture winter survival. If bone is intentionally burned, then a successful hunt provides more than meat, hide, sinew, and tools. It may also help keep the hearth alive. Nothing useful is casually wasted. You sit close to the fire and watch a piece of material darken, curl, then glow. Fire demands constant judgment. Add too much fuel and the flames rise rapidly. Add too little and the heat fades. Place wet material carelessly and smoke thickens. Leave the hearth unattended and sparks can escape. Even inside a shelter, fire is both protector and hazard. Smoke collects in enclosed spaces. Your eyes sting. Your throat grows irritated. Ventilation matters. A shelter that traps all warmth but also traps all smoke is not a triumph of engineering. It is a coughing chamber. Ancient people must balance two competing needs. Keep heat in. Let smoke out. This sounds simple until you're trying to do both while cold air searches for every opening. The shape of a hearth matters too. A shallow depression can protect embers from drafts. Stones can help define the burning area. Ash accumulates and insulates coals. Some hearths are used repeatedly, building up layers that archaeologists can still recognize thousands of years later. A council decree does not prove any of this because there are no councils leaving written winter regulations. Instead, the ground itself keeps the evidence. Charcoal, ash, burned sediment, heat-altered stone, bones changed by flame. These traces preserve ordinary evenings more faithfully than heroic legends ever could. You can almost reconstruct the movements around the hearth. Someone kneels to adjust fuel. Someone rotates a piece of meat. Someone warms frozen hands. Someone pushes a smoking branch farther inward. Someone moves a child away from the edge. Fire organizes space. The warmest places become valuable. People sleep or work according to where heat reaches. Objects that need drying are positioned carefully. Meat may hang nearby. Tools are repaired within the firelight. The hearth becomes the center of activity because darkness beyond it can be absolute. There is no electric glow filling the room. Beyond the flame, faces disappear quickly. The fire creates a circle of visibility only a few steps wide. Outside that circle, winter exists unseen. Listen closely and you hear the crackle of fuel, the soft shift of bodies, perhaps the scrape of stone against stone. Then a gust enters. The flame bends. Everyone notices. Wind is one of the great enemies of warmth because moving air strips heat away from exposed surfaces and accelerates fuel consumption. So the location of a hearth is chosen carefully. Natural walls, depressions, rock overhangs, and constructed windbreaks can all protect flames. Even the entrance of a shelter may be considered in relation to prevailing winds. You're not merely making a fire, you're placing it inside a small system. Wind direction, fuel supply, smoke escape, sleeping positions, cooking area, drying space. One scandalous aside, if prehistoric domestic life deserves such a phrase, is that fire may also reshape social behavior simply by extending the useful day. Without artificial light, darkness restricts many activities. With a hearth, people remain awake together, they talk, they repair things, they teach, they perform repetitive tasks that daylight hours may not allow. Researchers have suggested that firelit evenings may encourage storytelling and social interaction in distinctive ways, although no agreement has been reached on exactly how important hearthside conversation is in the development of human culture. Still, the possibility is easy to feel. Daylight is practical, firelight is intimate. During the day, attention points outward toward weather, animals, terrain, and work. At night, attention turns toward the people beside you. A quiet flame becomes part heater, part lamp, part kitchen, part workshop, and perhaps part theatre. It is impressively efficient for something produced by burning a stick. Food changes in the flames as well. Cooking makes many foods easier to chew and digest. Frozen meat can be softened. Fat can be warmed. Tough tissues become more manageable. Heat also reduces some biological risks in food. When calories are precious, anything that helps the body extract energy matters. You smell roasting meat mingling with smoke. Fat drips. A brief flare rises. Someone reacts quickly because wasting fat into a fire would be irritating. Fat is valuable energy in a cold environment. Your body burns enormous amounts of energy maintaining temperature and carrying out physical work. Warm food does not magically solve winter, but it can make a meal more useful and more pleasant. And pleasure should not be underestimated. Imagine spending days surrounded by cold, wind, limited daylight, and repetitive labour. Then imagine holding something warm. The psychological difference matters even if it leaves no archaeological trace. The hearth becomes familiar. Its shape is known. Its sounds are known. Its heat is predictable. In a landscape where weather can change quickly, predictability is soothing. You understand why people protect it. A spark carried on wind can vanish. An ember protected beneath ash can survive. A little dry tinder stored carefully may become more valuable than an armful of damp branches. Skill lies in knowing the difference. Your fingers move close to the fading coals. You push ash gently across them. The bright orange disappears beneath grey powder. To an inexperienced eye, the fire looks dead, but underneath, heat remains. Hours later, a breath of air and handful of dry material may bring it back. There is something almost magical about that transformation, though it is entirely practical. A dark hearth suddenly glows. Smoke curls upward. A tiny flame appears. Warmth returns. And on a winter night where the cold presses against every surface, that small flame feels much larger than it is. You settle near it while fuel burns slowly. The light moves across hands, tools, hides, stone, and tired faces. No one wastes much. No one needs a towering blaze. The goal is simply to keep enough heat alive. A branch shifts. An ember brightens. Ash settles softly around it. The fire continues its quiet work, holding a small circle of human warmth against a world that would otherwise take it away. The wind reaches you before the snow does. It slides across the open plain, catches loose grains of ice, and drives them sideways until the ground seems to move. Your eyes narrow, your cheeks sting, even beneath layers of hide. You feel cold searching for weak places around your neck and wrists. In weather like this, warmth is not only something you produce, it is something you must prevent the wind from stealing. That makes shelter one of the quiet masterpieces of ice-age survival. You're not trying to build a palace. You do not need straight walls, decorative columns, or a pleasant little breakfast nook. You need a place where moving air slows down, body heat accumulates, and a winter night becomes survivable. The landscape itself offers the first possibilities. A limestone cliff rises nearby. At its base, a dark opening leads beneath the rock. To modern imagination, this seems obvious. Ancient humans live in caves. Cartoons have been insisting on it for generations. Reality is less convenient. Caves can be useful, but they are not everywhere. Some are damp, some flood, some collect cold air. Some are occupied by animals with very strong opinions about property rights. A cave bear is not likely to recognize your reservation. Even when people use caves, they may occupy only particular areas near entrances where daylight and ventilation are better. Deep chambers can be cold, dark, awkward, and smoky. Records confirm that Paleolithic people repeatedly used caves and rock shelters across parts of Europe and Western Asia, leaving behind hearths, tools, animal bones, pigments, and occupation layers. Yet caves represent only part of ancient life. Many communities live in open landscapes. There, shelter must be made. You begin with location. Before a single hide is stretched or pole placed, you study the terrain. A slight hollow can matter. A ridge can matter. A rock face can matter. The difference between facing the prevailing wind and sitting behind natural protection can determine how much fuel you burn through the night. You feel the ground beneath your feet. Is it dry? Does meltwater collect here? Will snow drift against this side? Is the campsite close enough to water without sitting directly in a damp channel? Ancient engineering begins with questions like these. A poor location cannot always be rescued by good construction. Choose wisely, and the land performs part of the work for you. In some areas, people create circular or oval dwellings from poles, hides, stones, and whatever structural material is available. The basic principle is wonderfully familiar. Build a frame, cover it, secure it, keep openings small, make the wind go somewhere else. Wooden poles may form a framework when trees or suitable branches are available. Animal hides can be stretched over the structure. Stones placed around the edges may help prevent coverings from lifting. You run your hand over one of those hides. It feels heavy and stiff in the cold. The outer surface has known rain, snow, mud, and smoke. The inner side provides something precious, a barrier between your skin and moving winter air. Air itself becomes useful when trapped. Modern insulation works largely because pockets of still air reduce heat transfer. Ancient people may not describe the physics, but experience teaches the result. Layers help, barriers help. A compact enclosed space is easier to warm than an exposed one. There is an intimate mathematics to shelter size. Too large, and precious heat disperses. Too cramped, and movement becomes difficult. Too sealed, and smoke accumulates. Too open, and wind wanders inside as though personally invited. So a dwelling becomes a compromise shaped by repeated experience. Imagine crouching beneath a low roof. The entrance is not grand. You may have to bend or crawl slightly. This is inconvenient. But a small entrance loses less warmth. Modern architecture would call it unpleasant. Winter survival calls it sensible. Inside, the sound changes immediately. The roar of the wind becomes duller. High covering trembles above you. A support creaks. Someone brushes snow from a shoulder. The air smells of leather, earth, smoke, animal fat, and damp woolly material drying near warmth. It is not fresh mountain air. Fresh mountain air is outside trying to freeze you. Here, stale warmth wins. Some of the most striking archaeological evidence for open-air shelters comes from Eastern and Central Europe, where remains associated with mammoth bones have been discovered at several sites. Large bones appear arranged in circles or structures that may have helped form dwelling foundations or walls. Massive skulls, jaws, tusks, and long bones create an image so dramatic that these places are often described as mammoth bone houses. The name sounds almost fantastical, yet mammoth remains are large, durable, and abundant in certain Ice Age environments. Where timber is scarce, large bones can become useful structural material. A mammoth bone is heavy. That is annoying when carrying it. It is excellent when you want something not to blow away. A curious footnote is that some mammoth bone concentrations contain remains from many individual animals, raising questions about whether people hunt all of them, collect bones from natural death sites, or combine both methods. You can picture the practicality. A giant femur does not need to be freshly acquired to hold down a wall. If an old bone lies on the landscape and remains solid, it is building material waiting patiently for someone with ambition and cold feet. Scholars bicker over the interpretation of some mammoth bone structures. Certain arrangements clearly reflect deliberate human activity, but no agreement has been reached on whether every famous circular concentration represents a fully roofed house, a windbreak, a foundation, a ritual feature, or some combination of uses. Archaeology rarely hands you the roof. Wood rots, hide disappears, plant fibre decays. What survives is often the heavy material at ground level. You must reconstruct the missing upper half. Still, the evidence suggests considerable planning. Shelter construction requires labour. Someone gathers material. Someone transports it. Someone prepares hides. Someone understands tension and weight. Someone repairs damage when wind loosens a covering. Even temporary dwellings represent stored knowledge. You notice this most clearly when weather worsens. Snow begins collecting along the outside wall. Strangely, that can help. Snow contains trapped air and can act as insulation. A drift against a well-placed shelter may reduce direct wind exposure, but too much accumulation becomes dangerous if it weighs down a weak covering or blocks ventilation. Ancient people do not need equations to notice the difference. They have winters. Winters are excellent teachers, although their grading system is unnecessarily severe. The floor matters as much as the roof. Lying directly on frozen ground allows heat to drain from your body, so you create separation. Dry grass, hides, brush, reeds, or other available materials can form bedding. Animal skins provide another barrier. You lower yourself carefully onto a layered sleeping area. The difference is immediate. Cold still exists beneath you, but it reaches you more slowly. You curl your legs inward. Another person lies nearby. Space is limited, and that may be deliberate. Shared sleeping areas allow people to benefit from one another's body heat. Privacy, in the modern sense, becomes less important than thermal efficiency. Nobody is storming off dramatically to sleep on the sofa. There is no sofa. There is also no spare room. A compact shelter encourages closeness because closeness is useful. Even the placement of possessions changes the environment. Bundles of hides add mass. Stored materials reduce open floor area. Tools remain within reach. Footwear and clothing can be positioned where they dry without scorching. Every object finds a place because the interior is small. Organization becomes survival disguised as housekeeping. One scandalous aside appears when you consider prehistoric cleanliness. A shelter occupied repeatedly can accumulate scraps, ash, bone fragments, parasites, damp material, and waste. Ancient people are not necessarily careless about this. Archaeological patterns suggest that activity areas can be organized, with debris discarded in particular places and hearths maintained separately. But winter does make cleanliness complicated. Throwing something outside sounds easy until outside is dark, windy, and bitterly cold. Suddenly the ancient equivalent of taking out the rubbish becomes a negotiation. Perhaps tomorrow, perhaps someone younger will do it. Civilization begins with many noble achievements, and probably also with arguing over whose turn it is. Some camps are occupied briefly, others are returned to repeatedly. Mobility shapes construction. If you expect to leave soon, spending enormous energy on a heavy shelter makes little sense. If you intend to remain through a season, sturdier investment becomes worthwhile. This creates a range of dwellings rather than one universal Ice Age house. A hunting party may need only temporary protection. A larger residential camp may justify stronger structures, storage areas, hearths, and carefully arranged working spaces. Human flexibility is visible in architecture. You build according to circumstances. In wooded regions, timber becomes more available. On treeless plains, bone, stone, and hide become more important. Near cliffs, natural rock reduces construction needs. In deep snow, the snow itself may become part of the protective landscape. The solution changes because humans do not insist that the environment adapt to their preferred floor plan. They adapt the floor plan. The orientation of a shelter can reveal similar thought. An entrance facing away from dominant winds reduces drafts. A wall positioned against a slope gains protection. Several structures grouped together may alter airflow and create shared working areas. You begin to see a campsite as more than scattered huts. It is designed human space. There are places for sleeping, places for making tools, places for processing animals, places for fire, places where debris gathers, perhaps places where children remain close enough to watch without constantly wandering through sharp stone flakes. Parents have probably been saying some version of "do not touch that" for a very long time. The roof above you shakes again. This time you reach upward and press against a loose section. Someone outside adds weight along an edge. Repair is continuous. Hide stretches. Bindings weaken. Poles shift. Snow loads change. Shelter is not built once and forgotten. It must be maintained. That maintenance may use sinew, leather strips, plant fibre, wooden pegs, stones, or combinations of materials. Cold fingers make every knot harder. You learn to repair small problems before they become large ones. A gap the width of your hand seems insignificant in daylight. At night, with wind entering directly onto your sleeping place, it becomes the most important architectural problem on Earth. For a moment, it feels as though the entire Ice Age exists just beyond the wall. Wind scrapes over frozen ground, snow races through darkness, large animals move somewhere beyond sight. Yet inside the air is calmer, not warm in the way a heated modern room is warm. Nothing here is effortlessly warm, but the difference may be 20 degrees of comfort, perhaps more in the best circumstances, simply because wind has been blocked and human heat remains concentrated. That difference is enormous. Your breathing steadies, the roof is low, the walls are imperfect, the floor is uneven, there are no windows, no lock, no mattress, no neatly folded towels waiting beside a bathroom. And still, this structure represents something extraordinary. Humans have taken materials from animals, plants, stone, earth, and bone, and created a climate within a climate. Outside, winter dictates the conditions. Inside, people negotiate with them. The wind continues pressing against the covering, but now its force reaches you mostly as sound, a long rushing noise, a faint vibration through the frame, the occasional scrape of snow along the outer wall. Your fingertips rest against rough bedding. The ground beneath it remains frozen and hard, but its cold feels distant. Bodies settle into the limited space. Movements become quieter. The shelter holds, not perfectly. It does not need to. For one more night, it only needs to be good enough. Cold finds the smallest opening first. You feel it at the wrist where a strip of hide is loosened, then around the neck, then through the thin space between two overlapping pieces of clothing, where the wind presses fabric inward against your skin. The lesson is immediate. A hide thrown loosely over the shoulders is useful, but it is not enough. To survive a truly severe winter, clothing has to fit. That sounds obvious now because you live in a world of sleeves, seams, socks, boots, gloves, buttons, zippers, and clothing sizes designed to contain nearly every imaginable human shape. But fitted clothing is a remarkable technology. It transforms animal skin from a simple covering into a portable shelter that moves with your body. You bend your elbow, the sleeve bends with you. You raise one knee, the leg covering stays in place. You walk into the wind, and the material does not flap uselessly behind you like a heroic but deeply impractical cape. This is where ancient tailoring begins to matter. Archaeological evidence shows that humans produced tools suitable for working hides and eventually make eyed needles from bone and ivory. Such needles become especially common in parts of Eurasia during the later Paleolithic. Records confirm that carefully shaped bone needles appear tens of thousands of years ago. They are small objects, easily overlooked beside mammoth bones and stone spear points, but their importance is enormous. A needle means you can pierce material with control, with thread made from sinew, plant fibre, or other suitable material. You can join pieces of hide together. You can make seams, and once you can make seams, you can begin making clothing shaped for the body. Your fingers run over a stitched line. It is not perfectly straight. Nobody is entering this garment into a luxury fashion exhibition, but the seam closes a gap where wind would otherwise enter. That is enough to make it beautiful. The raw material begins with animals. A successful hunt provides more than food. Skin can become clothing, bedding, containers, coverings, straps, and shelter material. Yet removing a hide is only the beginning. Fresh skin is wet, heavy, and biologically eager to rot. If you simply wrap yourself in it and hope for the best, winter will soon introduce you to several unpleasant smells. The hide must be processed. You scrape away flesh and fat from the inner surface. The work is repetitive. Stone tools pass across the skin again and again. Your shoulders ache. Your hands become greasy. The smell is strong enough to remove any romantic ideas you may have had about prehistoric fashion design. Hide preparation requires knowledge. Different skins behave differently. Reindeer hide is not identical to horse hide. Young animals differ from older ones. Season matters because the condition and thickness of fur change throughout the year. A winter coat on a cold-adapted animal can provide extraordinary insulation. You begin to appreciate why hunters do not see an animal only as meat. They see material properties, thickness, flexibility, hair length, strength, weight. Every part suggests a different use. Processing may involve scraping, stretching, drying, working with fats, smoking, or other treatments that help preserve flexibility. Exact techniques leave frustratingly little direct evidence because leather usually decomposes. That creates one of archaeology's familiar problems. The things most essential to ordinary life are often the things least likely to survive. Stone lusts beautifully, it's just a warm pair of trousers does not. So researchers reconstruct prehistoric clothing through indirect clues. Needles, hide scrapers, where patterns on tools, human remains, artistic representations, rare preserved garments from later periods, even lice, oddly enough, may contribute information. A curious footnote comes from the evolutionary history of clothing lice, because clothing lice live primarily in garments rather than directly on the scalp. Genetic studies have been used to estimate when humans begin wearing clothing regularly. The dates remain uncertain and depend on assumptions about mutation rates, but the idea is wonderfully strange. One of the clues to ancient fashion may be a parasite. Human history is generous like that. You invent clothing. A louse notices the available real estate. No achievement goes unpunished. The basic principle of winter clothing is layering. You may wear an inner layer that helps trap warmth near the skin and an outer layer that blocks wind. Fur can be turned inward for insulation, or outward depending on conditions and purpose. Several thinner layers may sometimes work better than one stiff, heavy covering because trapped air between them adds insulation. Your body supplies the heat. Clothing tries to keep it from leaving. This is important because clothing does not create warmth by itself. A fur coat lying on a rock has no opinion about temperature. It becomes useful only when wrapped around a living body producing heat. You're essentially carrying a controlled pocket of warmer air with you. Fit becomes crucial. Loose openings allow that warm air to escape. A well-designed hood protects the head and neck. Sleeves protect the arms without preventing movement. Leg coverings reduce heat loss while walking. The entire system must allow you to hunt, carry objects, kneel, climb, and work. A garment that is wonderfully warm but makes you unable to move is not a garment. It is upholstery. Footwear may be even more important. Your feet spend their day touching the frozen world. Cold rises through snow, ice, stone, and hard ground. Moisture adds another problem. Wet feet lose heat rapidly, and prolonged dampness damages skin. so you build layers around them too. Imagine a soft inner wrapping of dry material or fur. Around that sits a hide shoe or boot, additional grass. Fur or plant fibre can provide insulation. The outer layer needs enough toughness to survive repeated contact with rough ground. You pull the footwear tight around the ankle, not too tight. Circulation matters. If you compress the foot too severely, you reduce blood flow and make cold injury more likely. Ancient clothing design is full of such compromises. Warm but flexible. Tight but not restrictive. Durable but not excessively heavy. Protective but repairable. Every garment carries a little engineering problem. Hands create another challenge. You need fingers to remain warm. You also need fingers to function. Mittens conserve heat better than separate finger coverings because fingers share warmth when grouped together, but mittens reduce dexterity. Try making a delicate stone tool while wearing thick mittens and you will understand the problem quickly. So you may alternate. Protect the hands while travelling. Expose them briefly for precise work. Warm them again when sensation begins to fade. There is no perfect solution. There is only constant adjustment. One scandalous aside appears in the possibility that prehistoric clothing might be more stylish than the old stereotype suggests. People decorate objects, make beads, use pigments, carve ornaments, and arrange shells or animal teeth on clothing. There is no reason to imagine everyone dressed in shapeless brown sacks. Personal display can survive even in harsh environments. A row of beads around a hood does nothing useful against frost. That may be precisely why it matters. Humans rarely limit themselves to pure necessity. Even when survival is difficult, you still care about identity. Perhaps a pattern indicates family. Perhaps a decoration marks age or achievement. Perhaps someone simply thinks it looks good. There is comfort in that familiar impulse. You can be cold and still care about appearance. The two conditions are perfectly compatible, as anyone who has attended an outdoor winter event in unsuitable shoes already knows. Scholars bicker over how sophisticated the earliest cold weather clothing really is. Some researchers argue that certain human populations must have possessed tightly fitted, multi-layered garments to occupy extremely cold environments successfully. Others caution that direct evidence is sparse and that needles alone do not reveal the complete form of the clothing being made. No agreement has been reached on exactly when garments resembling tailored coats, trousers, mittens, and boots become widespread. The missing leather keeps its secrets. Still, climate places limits on what is plausible. You cannot spend long periods in severe cold with only a casual hide over one shoulder. Human skin is too exposed. Hands and feet are too vulnerable. Wind is too efficient. If people occupy such regions repeatedly, they must possess effective protection. The clothing may vary greatly between groups, but it has to work. You learn its value most sharply when something fails. A seam tears while you are moving. Cold air enters instantly, so you stop. The damage is small, perhaps only a few centimetres, but leaving it unrepaired allows the tear to grow. You take out a pointed tool, thread passes through the opening, your fingers work carefully. Repair is part of the life of every garment. Hides stretch, threads break, edges wear thin. Footwear suffers especially quickly. Stone, ice, mud, and repeated flexing punish the soul. A person may need to maintain clothing almost constantly. That creates another reason why sewing knowledge matters. You cannot depend on one specialist living far away. Someone in the group needs to know how to fix what people wear. Children probably learn by watching. They see skins scraped. They see holes punched. They see thread pulled through. They may practice on scraps. Skill grows slowly through repetition. The finished garment contains many hours of labour. Losing it would be serious. Clothing may therefore be treated as valuable equipment rather than disposable material. You can replace a spear point comparatively quickly if suitable stone is available. Replacing a carefully processed winter hide is another matter. First you need the animal, then the skin, then the preparation, then the cutting, Then the stitching. The coat walking around on your shoulders represents accumulated time, and time is a resource winter never gives generously. You move outside. The air touches only a narrow strip of exposed face. Everything else sits behind layers. Your body warms the inner surfaces. The outer fur catches tiny grains of snow. They cling briefly before falling away. You notice how differently cold feels when properly dressed. It is still there. Your eyelashes may collect frost. Your breath still clouds. Your nose still protests. But the cold no longer attacks your entire body at once. It has been reduced to a series of manageable edges, a cuff to tighten, a hood to adjust, a boot to dry, a seam to repair. This is what clothing does at its best. It turns the climate from a direct physical assault into a collection of small practical problems. There is something deeply human about that transformation. You cannot stop winter, so you shrink it. You cut it into pieces small enough to solve. Your clothing rustles softly when you walk. Leather bends at the knees. Fur brushes your cheek. Sinew holds one panel tightly against another. Every movement is accompanied by technology so ordinary that they almost disappear from notice. That may be the greatest success a technology can achieve. When it works well, you stop thinking about it. You simply remain warm enough to continue walking. Across the frozen ground, your footprints form a line in the snow. The wind presses against your back. Beneath the layers, heat stays close to your skin. A needle no longer than a finger, a length of thread, and the carefully prepared hide of an animal have changed what climates a human body can endure. The cold remains enormous. Your clothing makes your vulnerable little patch of it smaller. The tracks are easier to see in fresh snow. A line of deep impressions crosses the pale ground ahead of you, each one broad enough to hold a pool of shadow. The edges are still crisp. Wind has not yet softened them. Something large passed here recently. You lower yourself beside the nearest print and study it. The snow inside is compacted. A few strands of dry grass have been exposed where a heavy foot broke through the crust. Farther ahead, another track appears, then another, stretching toward a low ridge. In winter, hunting begins long before anyone sees an animal. You read what the landscape has written. Hoof marks, dung, broken stems, scraped bark, hair caught against thorny vegetation, a patch where snow has been disturbed during feeding. Every sign narrows the distance between hunger and food. This matters because winter hunting is expensive. Walking through snow consumes energy. Carrying weapons consumes energy. Staying alert for hours consumes energy. A failed hunt is not simply disappointing. It means calories have been spent without calories returning. You cannot afford too many failures, so you do not chase everything you see. You choose. Large herbivores offer enormous rewards, but they also bring enormous risk. A mammoth carries enough meat and fat to support many people, yet getting close to one is not remotely like approaching a sleepy cow in a field. The animal is powerful, alert, and capable of crushing a human almost accidentally. You feel its scale from a distance. The back rises above the winter grass. Long hair moves in the wind. Tusks curve outward. Steam leaves the trunk in pale bursts. A successful mammoth hunt requires more than bravery. It requires coordination. You watch the terrain as carefully as the animal. A slope may slow it. Deep snow may limit movement. A narrow passage may guide the herd. Soft ground, a riverbank, or a natural obstacle may create opportunities. The landscape becomes part of the hunting strategy. Records confirm that Ice Age humans hunt and butcher mammoths at a number of sites across Eurasia, though scavenging also contributes to mammoth use in some places. The distinction matters. Finding a dead mammoth can be an extraordinary gift. Killing a healthy adult is another challenge entirely. Researchers examine cut marks, impact damage, weapon points, bone concentrations, and the age profiles of animals to understand what happens at particular sites. The evidence shows human involvement clearly in many cases. But not every pile of mammoth bones represents a dramatic, organized hunt. You move quietly along the ridge. Snow muffles your steps. That helps you, but it also hides the movement of others. A predator can use the same silence. Wolves may follow herds. Lions inhabit parts of the Ice Age world. Hyenas compete for carcasses. You are a hunter, but you're not automatically at the top of every argument. A freshly killed animal can attract attention quickly. That means the dangerous part does not necessarily end when prey falls. Sometimes it begins there. Smaller and medium-sized animals may be more reliable targets. Reindeer become especially important across many cold regions. They move seasonally in groups, sometimes in great numbers. Their meat feeds people, while antler, bone, sinew, hide, and fat all become useful materials. If you understand their roots, migration can turn an apparently empty landscape into a moving corridor of opportunity. You wait near a place where animals are likely to pass. Patience becomes a hunting tool. There is no reason to sprint across open ground if the prey is coming toward you. You remain still. Cold creeps into your legs. Your muscles begin to complain. You resist the urge to shift position too often. A distant sound reaches you. Not a roar. Not anything dramatic. A faint rhythmic crunch. Then another. The herd appears gradually. Dark shapes move across the white ground. You count without numbers written anywhere. Too far, closer, still too far. A hunter who throws too soon does not merely miss. A wounded animal may escape, taking the weapon point with it. Now you have lost food and equipment at the same time. Very efficient, if your goal is misery. Stone-tipped spears and other hunting weapons demand careful use. Some are thrust at close range, others are thrown. Later Paleolithic hunters also used devices such as spear throwers in some regions, increasing the speed and distance of projectiles. A spear thrower acts as an extension of the arm, providing extra leverage. It is a simple principle with powerful results. Suddenly your arm becomes longer without the inconvenience of actually growing another half-meter overnight. Technology gives distance between you and an animal that would rather not cooperate. Horse hunting presents different problems. Wild horses are fast. On open ground, simply running after them is absurd as you rely on prediction rather than speed. You understand where they drink, where they shelter, where they cross valleys, where ice or snow changes their movement. A hunter does not defeat a horse by becoming faster than a horse. You defeat the problem by refusing to play by the horse's rules. This is one of the quiet strengths of human hunting. You reshape the encounter. Several people can position themselves apart. Some may drive animals toward others. Natural barriers can guide movement. Noise can be used deliberately. Ambush reduces the need for pursuit. The hunting party becomes a coordinated system. That coordination also lowers risk. If an animal turns suddenly, someone can warn you. If one hunter is injured, others can help. If a kill produces more meat than one person can carry, a group can process it immediately. Large game hunting is therefore social, not because ancient humans enjoy meetings, but because meetings with large animals are safer when attended by colleagues. Oddly enough, prehistoric hunters may sometimes exploit animal behavior in ways that feel surprisingly theatrical. Drive lanes, natural bottlenecks, cliffs, river crossings, and narrow valleys can all concentrate movement. Later archaeological examples from different regions show humans constructing or using landscape features to funnel herds. For Ice Age contexts, the exact methods vary and are not always easy to reconstruct, but the principle is ancient. Make the animal go where you want it to go. This does not require the animal to understand the plan. Ideally, it should not. Your weapon leaves your hand. For a moment there is only motion. The animal reacts. The herd surges. Snow bursts upward. Hooves strike hard ground beneath the crust. Everything that was quiet becomes noise. You run, but not blindly. A wounded animal remains dangerous. You keep distance where possible. The hunters watch one another. Another weapon is prepared. Success may take repeated strikes. There is nothing effortless about it. When the animal finally collapses, nobody stands around admiring the achievement for very long. Winter begins charging interest immediately. The carcass must be processed. Meat cools quickly in freezing air, which can help preservation, but cold also stiffens hands and makes cutting difficult. You kneel beside the body. Stone edges do the work. Hide is opened carefully. Muscle is separated. Joints are understood through experience. Tendons are cut. Useful parts are organized. Butchery is skilled labor. A person who knows anatomy wastes less time and less meat. You do not randomly hack at a carcass. You know where major muscles lie. You know how limbs separate. You know which bones contain valuable marrow. You know where fat accumulates. Fat is one of the great prizes of winter hunting. Lean meat provides protein, but a cold body also needs concentrated energy. Animals themselves often become lean during hard seasons, making fat even more precious. You inspect deposits around organs, beneath skin, and within bones. A large quantity of lean meat can still leave a person nutritionally strained if fat and carbohydrates are too scarce. Ancient hunters may not use the language of metabolism, but the body teaches the lesson quickly. You crave energy-rich parts. Marrow becomes especially desirable. Long bones are broken to reach it. The sound is sharp. Stone strikes bone. Another blow. The shaft cracks. Inside lies a soft, calorie-dense reward. A curious footnote is that archaeologists can sometimes identify patterns of marrow extraction from deliberately broken bones. The fractures are not random. Fresh bone breaks differently from dry bone. Impact marks may reveal where people strike. A shattered leg bone can therefore preserve the ghost of a meal tens of thousands of years later. There is something wonderfully ordinary about that evidence. Not kings, not battles. Someone is simply hungry and knows exactly where the good part is. Scholars still argue whether some Ice Age hunting communities specialize heavily in particular large animals or maintain broader diets than the surviving archaeological record seems to suggest. Large bones preserve well. Tiny animal remains, fish bones, plants, and other foods can disappear more easily or receive less attention during older excavations. Arguments split along questions of preservation, sampling, seasonality, and local ecology. A site filled with reindeer bones may represent a specialized hunting camp, or it may preserve only one part of a much more varied annual diet. The ground tells a story, but it does not always tell the whole story. You feel that uncertainty in the hunt itself. Large prey may be rewarding, yet depending on one species is dangerous. Animals change routes, storms interrupt movement, herds become scarce. In those moments, smaller prey matters, hares, birds, fish where accessible, small mammals. Anything that can add calories deserves attention. Traps and snares may reduce the need for constant pursuit, though direct evidence for perishable trapping equipment is limited. Plant fiber cordage rarely survives for tens of thousands of years, but the concept is simple enough to fit well within the broader technological abilities of prehistoric peoples. A small animal does not feed a whole group for long. Several small animals can still make the difference between going to sleep hungry and going to sleep slightly less hungry. Winter rarely rewards pride. You take what works. Hunting also demands knowledge of weather. Fresh snowfall reveals tracks beautifully. Heavy snowfall can erase them. Hard crust may support a human briefly, but break beneath a heavier animal, or the reverse depending on conditions. Wind carries scent. Fog reduces visibility. A sudden storm turns a familiar valley into a blank white space. So you watch the sky, not because you are poetic, because you want to return alive. The hunt ends only when food reaches the people who need it. A large carcass may be too heavy to move whole. You butcher it where it falls and carry selected parts. The highest value pieces may travel first. Loads are tied. Meat hangs from shoulders or poles. The walk back feels longer because now every step carries weight. Your thighs burn. Breath rises around your face. Snow compresses beneath your feet. Behind you, scavengers may eventually claim whatever remains. Nothing in this landscape stays unused for long. By the time darkness thickens, your hands smell of blood, hide, cold stone, and animal fat. Your body is exhausted, yet the burden you carry is reassuringly heavy. Each strip of meat means time. Each piece of fat means heat inside a human body. Each tendon, bone, and hide means another useful material. That is the true scale of a successful winter hunt. It is not one triumphant moment. It is days of survival converted from hoof, muscle, marrow, patience, and knowledge. You walk on through the dim snow, following the safest line home, while the frozen landscape closes quietly around the tracks behind you. Hunger changes the way you look at everything. A frozen landscape that once seemed empty begins to divide itself into possibilities. A patch of dry grass might hide seeds. A strip of exposed ground near a riverbank may contain roots. A cluster of bones abandoned by predators could still hold scraps worth recovering. Even the contents of an animal's stomach may become interesting when the alternative is several more days with very little to eat. Winter does not encourage fussiness. It encourages calculation. You wake with an ache beneath your ribs that is not yet dangerous, but it makes itself known. Your body has spent the night producing heat. Every shiver has cost energy. Every hour of sleep has quietly consumed part of yesterday's meal. Now the cold demands payment again. The great problem is not simply finding food. It is making summer and autumn abundance last through periods when almost nothing fresh can be gathered. Cold, fortunately, can help. A carcass left in freezing conditions does not spoil as quickly as it would beneath a warm sun. Meat can freeze naturally. Pieces can be stored where low temperatures slow decay. In some circumstances, winter itself becomes a gigantic freezer. That sounds wonderfully convenient until a thaw arrives. Then the freezer becomes unreliable. You cannot simply place food outside and assume the climate will behave. Animals may find it. Sunlight may warm it. Moisture may encourage decay. A sudden shift in weather can ruin what you were counting on. So storage requires thought. Meat can be cut into thinner pieces, dried in moving air, or exposed to smoke. Drying removes moisture that microorganisms need. Smoking adds another layer of preservation and changes the surface of the food. Records confirm that humans have been drying and smoking food since deep prehistory. Although these soft organic remains of ancient meals are far less likely to survive than stone tools or bones. You slice meat carefully, thicker pieces dry slowly, thin strips expose more surface area. A rack or suspended line keeps them away from dirt. Smoke curls around them. The smell becomes rich, salty, even when there is no salt, because your senses are already imagining the meal. Hours pass, then days. The texture changes. What was soft becomes darker and tougher. It is not a luxurious meal by modern standards. You may chew for an impressively long time, but dried meat is portable. It does not need to be eaten immediately. That makes it valuable. Food stored today can become survival next week. The same principle applies to fat. Rendered animal fat can sometimes be separated from tissues by heating. Once processed and protected, it becomes a concentrated source of energy. Fat contains far more calories by weight than protein or carbohydrate. You do not know the number of calories. You know the feeling. A little fat leaves you more satisfied than a large quantity of very lean meat. Your body tells you which foods matter. People living in cold environments often pursue fatty animals or fatty portions with particular enthusiasm because winter raises energy demands. The richest pieces may be shared carefully. Not every person needs exactly the same amount. A nursing mother may have different needs from an adult who has been resting. A child cannot simply be given the same portion as the largest hunter. Food distribution becomes social judgment. This is where prehistoric life becomes less like a heroic survival contest and more like an extremely tense family kitchen. There is a limited supply. Everyone knows it. Someone has to decide how quickly it disappears. Eat generously now, and the stored food may vanish before conditions improve. Eat too little, and people become weak. Weak people travel poorly. They hunt poorly. They recover from illness slowly. Rationing is not about finding the smallest amount that keeps you technically alive. It is about preserving enough strength to continue doing everything survival requires. A curious footnote is that some ancient communities may deliberately store food in pits, natural crevices, or other protected locations where cool temperatures help preserve it. Direct evidence from the deepest Paleolithic is difficult to interpret because storage containers made from hide, bark, woven fibre, or wood usually decay. Stone leaves evidence. A leather bag often leaves nothing at all. Yet it would be strange to imagine mobile people capable of complex hunting, sewing, and tool-making, simply placing every piece of food on the floor. Perishable technology may be almost invisible to archaeology while being completely ordinary in daily life. You feel this invisibility when you handle a pouch made from skin. It is light, flexible, useful. It can hold dried berries, seeds, rendered fat, or small pieces of meat. Tens of thousands of years later, the pouch may be gone. The stone scraper used to prepare it remains. History keeps the scraper and throws away the handbag. It has questionable priorities. Animal food dominates many popular images of Ice Age diets, particularly in cold northern environments, but plants do not simply vanish from human knowledge. When available, roots, tubers, seeds, nuts, fruits, and edible greens can supplement meat. Cold seasons reduce that variety dramatically, yet skilled gatherers know where certain resources persist. Underground storage organs are especially interesting because soil can protect them from surface weather. You use a digging stick to break hard ground. It is slow. The earth resists. Your fingers ache from gripping the tool. Eventually a root comes free. It looks unimpressive. No one writes an epic poem about a muddy tuber, but carbohydrates provide useful energy, and anything edible that broadens the diet matters. Plants may also be dried during warmer months for later use. Seeds keep better when moisture is controlled. Nuts can remain edible for considerable periods. Berries may be dried. The exact menu depends heavily on region. There is no single Ice Age diet. Someone living near a coast encounters different possibilities from someone deep inside a continental grassland. People beside rivers can exploit fish. Those near seasonal wetlands may catch birds. Coastal communities can gather shellfish when conditions allow. Winter survival is therefore local. Knowledge that works in one valley may be useless several hundred kilometers away. You cannot carry a universal prehistoric cookbook. You carry familiarity with your own landscape. Water presents another quiet challenge. Snow surrounds you, but snow is not instantly useful drinking water. Eating large quantities of snow directly lowers body temperature. Melting it costs fuel. Ice can sometimes be collected and melted more efficiently, depending on conditions. A vessel capable of holding water becomes important, but pottery is absent for much of the period you're imagining. So how do you heat liquid without a ceramic pot? There are clever alternatives. Waterproof containers can be made from hide, stomach tissue, wood, bark, or other organic materials where available. Heated stones can be dropped into liquid to warm or boil it. The technique sounds almost too simple. Heat a stone, move it carefully, place it into the container, repeat. The water warms without placing the container directly in flame. Stone boiling is known from many societies and can leave behind heat-fractured rocks. No agreement has been reached on how widespread particular forms of stone boiling are during the earlier Ice Age, especially because proving the exact purpose of burned stones can be difficult. Still, the principle falls comfortably within human technological ability. You watch a hot stone enter cold water. Steam appears. For a moment, the scent rising from the container is almost comforting. Perhaps pieces of meat simmer inside. Perhaps roots soften. Boiling can make tough foods easier to eat and allows nutrients that would otherwise remain attached to bones or tissues to enter the liquid. Even a thin broth has value. A warm liquid brings energy and hydration together. Then there are the bad days. The days when hunting fails. The days when stored supplies have fallen too low. The days when weather prevents travel. This is when scavenging becomes less embarrassing and more sensible. You find the remains of an animal killed by another predator. Much of the meat is gone. The ribs have been opened. Snow covers part of the carcass. You approach cautiously because whoever killed it may still consider it property. A wolf pack is unlikely to respect philosophical arguments about resource sharing. If the site is safe, you inspect what remains. Small scraps matter. Fat hidden in less obvious places matters. Bones matter if they still contain edible material. Brains, organs, connective tissues, and marrow can all be valuable depending on freshness and circumstances. Humans are flexible feeders. That flexibility is one reason survival remains possible when ideal foods disappear. One scandalous aside concerns stomach contents. In desperate conditions, partially digested plant matter found inside hunted herbivores may occasionally offer nutrients that humans otherwise struggle to obtain during winter. Direct prehistoric evidence is naturally difficult to prove, and you should not imagine everyone eagerly lining up for this delicacy. Still, ethnographic accounts from some Arctic peoples show that partially digested vegetation from caribou or reindeer stomachs has sometimes been consumed. It is an excellent reminder that the phrase edible expands considerably when supermarkets do not exist. You may also learn to recognize the dangerous limits of meat-heavy eating. Extremely lean meat can create problems if eaten in large amounts without enough fat or carbohydrate. Modern researchers sometimes describe a form of protein poisoning associated with excessive consumption of very lean meat. The body cannot rely indefinitely on unlimited protein alone. Ancient people do not need laboratory terminology to notice that certain diets leave them weak, nauseated, or unsatisfied. Experience creates nutritional knowledge long before nutritional science. The richest resources therefore receive attention beyond simple muscle meat. Fat deposits, marrow, organs, brains, anything energy-dense. Scholars still argue whether some Ice Age populations depend overwhelmingly on large animal foods or whether plant and small animal contributions are routinely underestimated. Arguments split along preservation and geography. Stable isotope evidence from some ancient human bones suggests very high reliance on animal protein. Yet isotopes are better at revealing certain kinds of dietary input than others. Plant foods leave fewer durable remains. Small bones can be missed during excavation. A diet can therefore appear narrower in the archaeological record than it felt at the dinner table. Or perhaps it really was narrow in some places. Cold environments do not guarantee culinary variety. Sometimes the menu is simply whatever has not run away. You settle beside stored food and inspect what remains. A few strips are set aside, a lump of hardened fat is divided, roots sit near the edge of the food area. Nothing looks abundant, yet nothing is wasted casually. A fragment dropped onto the ground is picked up. Bone scraps can be revisited. Grease can be recovered. A container is scraped clean. Hunger encourages attention. Meals become slower because there is no expectation of seconds. You chew deliberately. Warmth begins spreading through your chest. The sensation is subtle but immediate. Your body has received what it needs most. Energy, not luxury, not variety. Just enough fuel to keep producing heat. to keep muscles working, to keep thoughts clear. Outside, the frozen landscape may offer almost nothing today. That does not mean you eat only what today provides. You are living from decisions made weeks or months earlier. Food dried when it was plentiful, fat preserved when animals were in better condition, seeds gathered before snow covered the ground, roots remembered beneath frozen soil, small reserves protected from animals and damp. Winter survival is partly the art of eating the past slowly. You close the food container. There is still something left. Not much. Enough. And in the coldest months, that small difference can carry an entire group through another hungry day. The cold changes the meaning of closeness. In a warmer season, another person's shoulder pressed against yours may feel unnecessary. In a winter shelter, it feels practical. You settle into a sleeping space where bodies lie near one another, knees drawn inward, hides pulled tightly across several people at once. The warmth beneath the coverings does not belong to any single person. It accumulates. A child shifts in the darkness. Someone quietly adjusts the edge of a hide. An older person coughs. Another body moves closer. This is not merely affection, though affection certainly exists. It is thermal cooperation. A human body continuously produces heat, and several bodies gathered in a protected space can create a noticeably warmer sleeping environment than one person alone. Shared bedding, overlapping coverings, and close sleeping arrangements reduce the amount of exposed surface. You become, in the most literal sense, part of somebody else's winter equipment. That is less poetic than it sounds, but considerably more useful. Survival in extreme cold depends on cooperation at nearly every stage of life. One person cannot efficiently hunt, gather fuel, process food, repair tools, care for children, tend injuries, maintain clothing, watch for danger, and keep track of changing weather all at once. A group can divide these tasks, not rigidly, not according to a neat chart scratched into the wall, but enough that people begin depending on one another's strengths. Some adults travel farther, others remain closer to camp, some are better at tracking, some are patient with detailed craft work, some recognize subtle changes in animal behavior, some know how to calm a frightened child when the wind begins hammering against the shelter. Skill is unevenly distributed, and that is useful. You do not need everyone to be excellent at everything. You need the group to contain enough knowledge collectively. Records confirm that prehistoric humans sometimes survive severe injuries for months or years after the initial trauma. Skeletal remains reveal healed fractures, damaged limbs, tooth loss, degenerative conditions, and other problems that would have made independent survival difficult. A broken bone that heals tells you something simple, but powerful. The injured person remained alive long enough for healing to occur. In many cases, that probably means other people helped. Someone brings food, someone slows the pace of travel, someone carries materials, someone performs tasks the injured person cannot manage temporarily. Care is not visible as a fossil. Its consequences are. You imagine waking with a damaged ankle. Standing is painful. Walking is worse. In a society where nearly every useful activity requires movement, this is serious. Yet food still arrives. A piece of meat is placed within reach. A tool is handed to you so you can perform work while seated. Perhaps you scrape hide. Perhaps you shape bone. Perhaps you repair something. Being injured does not automatically mean becoming useless. Human communities can redistribute labor. That flexibility matters enormously. Someone who cannot hunt may still teach. Someone who cannot walk far may still remember routes. Someone whose teeth are badly worn may still prepare tools. The group gains resilience because contribution does not take only one form. Older people can become especially valuable for this reason. An elderly person may not match a younger hunter's speed, but speed is only one kind of survival advantage. Memory can be more important. You sit beside someone who has seen many winters. They know what happened when snow arrived unusually early. They remember a valley where animals gathered during drought. They know which plants are dangerous when confused with similar edible ones. They recognize the shape of a storm that younger people have never experienced. A long life becomes an archive. There are no bookshelves. There are people. That makes the death of an experienced adult more than an emotional loss. It can also remove information from the group. Knowledge must therefore be transferred while people are still alive. Children listen. They imitate. They are corrected. They watch hands performing tasks hundreds of times. Instruction may be direct, but much of learning probably happens through participation. You hand a child a small, safe piece of material. They copy the movements of an adult. The first attempt is clumsy. The second is also clumsy. Nobody expects instant mastery. Skill develops through repetition. This is another reason children are not simply passive mouths to feed. They are future storage vessels for cultural knowledge. Every technique they absorb increases the chance that the group can reproduce itself socially as well as biologically. Oddly enough, play may be part of this education. Young humans everywhere tend to imitate adult activities and games. A child may practice throwing with a small object. Another may copy food preparation. Miniature tools found at some archaeological sites have occasionally encouraged researchers to wonder whether children used them for learning or play. Not every tiny artifact belongs to a child, of course. Adults also make small tools. Still, the possibility is charming. Somewhere in deep prehistory, a child may be very seriously pretending to do grown-up work while an adult quietly fixes the result later. Human childhood is unusually long compared with many animals. That long developmental period is expensive. Children require food, warmth, protection, and teaching for years before they can contribute at adult levels. Yet the same long childhood allows extraordinary learning, language, tool use, social rules, ecological knowledge, craft techniques. All of these take time. You begin to see childhood itself as a group investment. Parents matter, but they may not be the only caregivers. Other adults can carry children, share food, watch them, teach them, and protect them. Anthropologists often use the term alloparenting for care, provided by individuals other than biological parents. Forms of cooperative childcare occur in many human societies. How deeply this pattern extends into prehistory cannot be observed directly, but it fits the broader dependence of human groups on shared labour. A child who can safely remain with several trusted adults allows other people to perform necessary tasks. That is not merely kindness, it is efficient. Food sharing works in similar ways. A successful hunter may return with far more meat than one household could consume quickly. Another person may have returned with nothing. If every individual keeps only what they personally acquire, luck becomes dangerous. One person eats well, another goes hungry. Tomorrow their fortunes may reverse. Sharing smooths out uncertainty. You're effectively distributing risk across the group. A successful day for one person can compensate for an unsuccessful day for another. This matters particularly with large prey, where hunting success can be unpredictable and the reward arrives in large packages. You cannot quietly hide half a reindeer under your sleeping mat. Someone will notice. Food is divided, perhaps according to custom, perhaps according to need, perhaps according to relationships and expectations. The exact rules vary across human cultures, and prehistoric rules are mostly invisible. But sharing itself leaves a strong impression because large-scale cooperation is so characteristic of our species. One scandalous aside is that sharing almost certainly does not eliminate argument. Humans can cooperate magnificently while remaining extremely interested in whether their portion is fair. You can imagine the glance towards someone else's piece. That one looks larger. Surely that one is larger. Perhaps it is the angle. Perhaps not. Prehistoric life does not turn people into saints. Cooperation works partly because social expectations have consequences. A person who repeatedly refuses to share may find others less willing to help later. Reputation matters. Generosity matters. Reciprocity matters. Not every exchange has to be immediate. You help today, someone helps you next month. This creates a social safety net long before formal institutions exist. There is no written insurance policy. There is memory. Humans are very good at remembering who did what. Sometimes impressively good, sometimes annoyingly good. Social bonds also reach beyond food. Information can be shared. Tools can be borrowed. Raw materials can circulate. People may move between groups through partnership, marriage, visits, or seasonal gatherings. Wider networks reduce the danger of becoming isolated when local conditions fail. The archaeological movement of shells, pigments, stone, and ornaments across long distances suggest that many prehistoric communities participate in broader social worlds. A piece of material arriving from far away may represent exchange, travel, gifting, or a chain of contacts. Whatever the root, it shows connection. Scholars still argue whether the exceptionally broad social networks associated with some Homo sapiens populations provide a decisive advantage over other human groups such as Neanderthals. Some researchers emphasize larger exchange networks, symbolic communication, and wider alliances. Others warn that the contrast may be exaggerated because archaeological preservation is uneven, and Neanderthal social behavior was more complex than older stereotypes suggest. No agreement has been reached on how much social networking alone explains differences in long-term survival. Still, isolation is dangerous in an unstable climate. More contacts mean more options. You may hear about animals moving elsewhere. You may gain access to a distant campsite. You may exchange a rare material. You may find partners outside your immediate group, reducing the problems of a very small mating population. Social relationships can therefore carry biological, economic, and informational value all at once. Inside the group, tension still exists. People become tired, hunger shortens patience, children cry, someone loses a tool, someone speaks sharply, someone refuses a task. Small communities do not remove human conflict. They intensify it because you cannot simply avoid irritating people forever. There are only so many places to sit. Conflict management becomes another survival skill as you need ways to reconcile. Jokes may help, storytelling may help, ritual may help, kin relationships and respected elders may help. People who cannot cooperate at all place, everyone at risk. This does not mean everyone must like everyone. History would be much shorter if that were required. It means people learn to function together despite irritation. The winter night makes that necessity visible. A storm thickens outside. Travel becomes impossible. The group remains enclosed together for long hours. Someone works quietly. Someone hums or speaks. A child falls asleep against an adult. Another person keeps watch near the entrance. Sleep itself may be shared in shifts when danger is possible. One person wakes, another rests. You are protected during your most vulnerable hours because someone else is alert. Trust enters the arrangement. You close your eyes because you believe another person will notice trouble. That is a remarkable act when you consider it carefully. Sleep removes control, yet humans sleep near one another and rely on collective protection. The arrangement is ancient. Your breathing slows. Other breaths surround you. Some are deep, some shallow. A child makes a small sound and settles again. The warmth beneath the hides becomes steady. No individual body produces enough heat to transform the whole winter. Together, however, you create a small zone where cold is held farther away, and that becomes a useful picture of human survival itself. One person remembers, another provides food, another teaches, another carries a child, another supports the injured, another stays awake while everyone else sleeps. The strength does not sit inside one heroic individual. It moves between people. In the darkness, you feel a shoulder beside yours and the weight of a shared covering across your chest. Outside, the temperature falls. Inside, the group remains close. Human beings survive the cold not only by making things, but by becoming something larger than a collection of separate bodies. They become a community. The landscape does not stay useful simply because you would prefer it to. One morning, the valley that has supported you for weeks begins to feel wrong. Animal tracks are fewer. The wind has hardened the snow into a crust. A stream that once offered dependable water is sealed beneath thicker ice. The distant herd you have been watching no longer appears along the ridge. You stand quietly and understand what this means. It may be time to move. For ancient humans living through severe winters, mobility is not a restless habit. It is a survival technology. You cannot force prey to remain nearby. You cannot command plants to grow beneath frozen ground. You cannot negotiate with a storm until it chooses a more convenient route. When local resources become unreliable, moving can be safer than staying. Of course, that sounds simple when expressed in one sentence. Actually moving is another matter. You possess tools, food, hides, children, perhaps an injured person, perhaps valuable raw materials that cannot easily be replaced. Every object has weight. Every kilometre costs energy. The decision to leave must therefore balance two unpleasant possibilities. Stay too long, and the area may no longer support you. Leave too soon, and you waste the resources still available. There is no map showing the correct answer. There is memory. You look toward a distant line of hills. Someone in your group knows what lies beyond them. Perhaps they travelled there during another season. Perhaps an older relative described a sheltered valley. Perhaps hunters have seen reindeer moving in that direction. The decision takes shape from fragments of information. That is how ancient movement often works. Not wandering, not aimless migration. Calculated travel through a known or partly known landscape. Records confirm that Ice Age humans transport stone, shells, pigments, and other materials across considerable distances, showing that people move through wide territories or maintain contact with those who do. Some raw materials travel dozens or even hundreds of kilometers from their geological sources. A stone tool can therefore reveal something about movement even when human footprints have disappeared. You begin packing. Nothing travels simply because it is sentimental. A heavy object has to justify itself. Stone cores may be worth carrying because they can produce future cutting edges. Prepared hides are valuable. Needles are light and difficult to replace. Food for the journey matters. Bulky material that can be gathered elsewhere may be left behind. You are constantly converting weight into usefulness. A small bone needle weighs almost nothing and can repair essential clothing. A large stone with no special quality is another story. It remains where it is. Ancient mobility rewards compact technology. You need equipment that can be carried, repaired, reused, and adapted. This helps explain why many prehistoric tools are surprisingly portable. A skilled person can carry a limited toolkit and recreate many other necessities from local materials. Knowledge weighs nothing. That is convenient. The first steps are slow. Snow reaches your ankles in places, then your calves. Where wind has cleared the surface, walking is easier. Where drifts collect, each step becomes work. You begin choosing your route according to snow itself. A direct line is not always the fastest line. A ridge may offer firm ground. A frozen river may create a natural corridor. A valley may be sheltered from crosswinds. Dense snow in one direction may make a longer detour more efficient. You learn to think in effort rather than distance. 5 kilometers through deep drifts can be worse than 10 across firm frozen ground. The landscape has texture. You read it with your feet. Cold air often settles in low areas, especially on clear, still nights, A valley floor can become colder than a slope above it. A route that feels protected from wind during daylight may become a pool of bitter air after sunset. Experience teaches where to stop. You do not simply walk until everyone collapses. You watch the sky and judge how much daylight remains. Setting up camp in darkness increases mistakes. A missing tool becomes harder to find. A child wanders 3 steps and disappears into shadow. A poorly chosen sleeping place reveals its problems too late. So movement has rhythm, travel, pause, observe, travel again. Stop while there is still enough light to repair. Migration also follows animals. Reindeer, wild horses, bison, and other herd species move according to food, weather, breeding cycles, and seasonal pressures. Humans who depend on them must understand those patterns. You do not need to follow directly behind every herd. Sometimes you anticipate where animals are going. A river crossing, a narrow pass, a sheltered grazing area, a south-facing slope where snow melts more quickly. Knowledge turns movement into interception. You're not chasing winter. You're trying to arrive where winter is slightly less difficult. Oddly enough, animal trails may become human roads long before anyone builds anything resembling a road. Large herd animals repeatedly choose practical routes through terrain. They avoid impossible slopes. They seek manageable crossings. They pass through gaps in ridges. Following their paths can save energy. A reindeer may therefore function as an unpaid prehistoric route planner. Its customer service is poor, but its sense of terrain is excellent. Frozen waterways create another opportunity. During suitable conditions, rivers and lakes can become broad with relatively flat travel surfaces. Vegetation, mud, and uneven banks disappear beneath ice. But frozen water is dangerous precisely because it sometimes looks trustworthy. You test before committing weight. Thickness varies. Currents weaken ice from below. Snow can hide cracks. Areas near springs remain thin. A section that safely supported you several days ago may not behave the same way now. Cold knowledge includes distrust. You learn not to believe every surface. Your hearing becomes useful. Ice can creak, pop, and shift. Some sounds are ordinary, others send people quickly toward a firmer ground. Touch matters too. You press a staff against suspicious surfaces. You notice water darkening beneath thin ice. You watch how snow lies on top. No single clue guarantees safety. The judgment comes from combinations. This is the kind of knowledge almost impossible to preserve archaeologically. A future excavator may find your stone point. They will not find the moment when someone says, in whatever language you understand, do not step there. Yet warnings like that may save more lives than many objects do. Travel with children forces a different pace. A small child cannot walk the same distance as a healthy adult. Infants must be carried. Older children alternate between walking and assistance. Loads may shift among adults as fatigue grows. Someone who begins the day carrying tools may later carry a child. Someone else takes the tools. Movement becomes collective arithmetic. You are always redistributing effort. An injured adult presents an even greater challenge. Perhaps they lean on a support. Perhaps others carry part of their equipment. In severe cases, some form of dragged load may help move people or supplies across snow. Researchers have proposed that simple sledges or travois-like devices could have existed deep in prehistory, though direct evidence is difficult because wood, hide, and cordage rarely survive. Scholars bicker over how early purpose-built sled transport appears and whether certain ancient groups routinely use it. The basic concept, however, requires little mystery. Dragging a load across snow can be easier than carrying the same weight on your back, a pair of poles, a hide, bindings. Suddenly, friction becomes your problem instead of gravity. The improvement is not magical, but your shoulders appreciate it. A curious footnote comes from footprints. At rare prehistoric sites, preserved tracks capture people moving together across ancient surfaces. Some trackways include adults and children, giving you an unusually direct glimpse of group travel. A footprint is wonderfully personal. The heel sinks, the toes push away, stride length changes, someone slips slightly, someone carries weight. For a moment, people cease to be abstract populations and become travellers. You can almost hear the complaint of a tired child. How much farther humanity has probably been asking that question for longer than anyone can measure. Navigation itself depends on many clues. The sun provides direction when visible. Stars may help on clear nights, though winter travel after dark carries obvious risks. Mountain shapes form landmarks. River systems guide movement. Wind patterns can leave recognizable forms in snow. Animal trails connect valleys. Even smells may matter when approaching vegetation, water, smoke, or a familiar camp. Your internal map is not drawn. It is remembered. A ridge connects to a stream. The stream leads toward a cliff. Beyond the cliff lies a basin. Beyond the basin, perhaps several days away, there is a place where stone of unusually good quality can be collected. This mental geography can cover large areas. Stories reinforce it. Directions can be embedded in descriptions of journeys. A memorable event anchors a location. The place where someone injured a hand. The valley where a huge herd appeared. The bend in the river where wolves followed the camp. Memory attaches geography to emotion. That makes it easier to retain. No agreement has been reached on exactly how far particular Ice Age groups travel during an average year. Some communities may range over very large territories. Others may remain relatively local when resources are dependable. Arguments split along climate, prey availability, population density, geography, and the difficulty of distinguishing direct travel from exchange. A shell found far inland does not prove one person walked all the way from the coast. It may have passed through several hands. Movement and connection overlap. That uncertainty makes the frozen world feel more human, not less. Different groups solve the same problem differently. There is no single migration schedule. A coastline offers one pattern. A river valley offers another. Open steppe demands something else. The environment sets boundaries, but culture fills in the route. Toward evening, weather becomes the main concern. Clouds thicken. The horizon disappears into grey. A fine powder of snow begins moving across the surface. You feel the wind shifting against one cheek. Someone decides the group should stop. This decision may save more energy than pressing forward another hour. Whiteout conditions can erase landmarks frighteningly quickly. Distance becomes difficult to judge. A familiar slope becomes invisible. Turning back can be impossible once tracks fill with blowing snow, so you choose a protected hollow. Loads come down, shoulders straighten. People begin the familiar work of making a temporary stopping place secure. The day's journey ends not because you reach a perfect destination, but because conditions tell you that continuing would be foolish. That ability to stop matters. Humans like progress. Winter prefers caution. Sometimes survival means accepting that 3 more kilometers are not worth the risk. You settle onto firm ground and look back toward the direction you've travelled. Wind is already softening the footprints. Within hours, some may disappear completely. That seems almost unfair. So much effort, erased so quickly. Yet the journey does not need to remain visible. Its value lies in where it brings you. Perhaps tomorrow you find fresh tracks. Perhaps the valley ahead contains grazing animals. Perhaps a river crossing gives access to another familiar territory. Movement keeps possibilities open. You listen as blowing snow brushes against hide and packed gear. Your legs feel heavy, your feet ache, but the unease of an exhausted landscape is gone. You're no longer waiting for a place to fail completely. You're moving toward another chance. Across immense frozen regions, this ability to leave, remember, navigate, and return turns geography into a tool. The cold world may be vast. You do not need to conquer all of it. You only need to know enough paths through it. Pain becomes dangerous when cold prevents you from ignoring it. At first, the numbness in your fingers almost feels helpful. The ache disappears. Then sensation fades further. Your fingertips become clumsy. A leather strap slips from your grasp. You try to tighten it and realize you cannot quite feel what your hands are doing. This is the point when numbness stops being comfortable and starts becoming a warning. Ancient winter survival is not only about avoiding hunger or finding warmth. It is also about keeping the body functional when cold. Injury, smoke, infection, exhaustion, and accident all begin working together. A person does not need a dramatic wound to become helpless. A damaged foot is enough. A badly swollen hand is enough. A chest infection is enough. In extreme weather, small medical problems can grow quickly because every ordinary task still needs to be done. You cannot simply spend 3 days under a blanket with soup and complain elegantly. Someone still has to move. Someone still has to eat. Someone still has to remain warm. You examine your fingers. The skin looks unusually pale. You press one fingertip and feel almost nothing. Modern medicine calls this frostbite when tissue begins freezing, but you do not need the word to recognize the danger. Experience teaches patterns. Numb skin is bad. Waxy skin is worse. Pain returning during warming may actually be encouraging because sensation still exists. You move your hands closer to warmth, but not carelessly. Rapid exposure to extreme heat can damage skin that has lost sensation because you cannot judge temperature properly. A numb hand held too close to flame may burn before you realize what is happening, so warming must be controlled. You tuck the hand against warmer skin. An armpit works. Another person's body can help. The goal is gradual recovery. Records confirm that human bodies from prehistory sometimes show healed fractures and other injuries that required significant recovery time. That survival proves something beyond simple toughness. People possessed practical knowledge about rest, protection, and care. A fracture does not heal because a person is brave. It heals because the damaged part remains sufficiently stable for long enough. You discover this when someone slips on frozen ground. The sound is not dramatic. A foot twists. A body falls awkwardly. Then comes the silence that follows pain. The injured person tries to stand and immediately sits again. A lower leg looks wrong. Now the entire group has a problem. Moving the person carelessly can worsen the injury. Leaving them where they fell is impossible. You need support. Wood, bone, hide strips, or other rigid and flexible materials can be combined into something resembling a splint. You align the limb as safely as your knowledge allows and secure it. Not so tightly that circulation stops. Not so loosely that nothing is supported. There is no instruction manual. There is observation accumulated across generations. Humans have been seeing injuries for as long as humans have existed. A badly healed fracture teaches the next generation something. So does a person who recovers well. Medical knowledge begins long before medicine has a name. Cuts present a different threat. A stone edge slips while processing hide. Suddenly there is blood across your palm. The wound may be small, but your hand is essential. You rinse it if clean water is available. You remove visible dirt. You press the wound closed. A strip of clean hide or plant material can act as a dressing. The principles are basic. Stop bleeding. Keep contamination out. Protect the injury from repeated movement. The real enemy may arrive later. Infection. Without antibiotics, a minor cut can become serious if bacteria enter tissue. Redness spreads. Heat develops. Swelling increases. Fever follows. Ancient humans may not understand microbes, but they can recognize outcomes. Dirty wounds often fare badly. Certain substances may seem to help. Some plants contain compounds with mild antimicrobial or anti-inflammatory effects. Resins and honey in later traditional medicine have sometimes been used on wounds. Whether particular Ice Age groups use specific treatments is much harder to establish. Plant materials usually disappear from archaeological sites. Knowledge can exist without leaving a visible trace. A curious footnote comes from dental calculus, the hardened plaque preserved on ancient teeth. Microscopic and chemical analyses of such material have sometimes detected traces of plants and other substances consumed by prehistoric people. Researchers have debated whether some of these plants might reflect medicinal use rather than ordinary food. The idea is tantalizing. A person with pain may chew a bitter plant. Thousands of years later, a tiny chemical trace remains trapped on a tooth. It is difficult to imagine a smaller medical record. Tooth problems themselves can be miserable. You bite down and feel a sharp pulse in one side of your jaw. There is no dentist. There is no anesthetic injection. There is no polite voice asking whether you floss. A cracked tooth may make chewing painful. An abscess can become dangerous. Worn teeth are common in many ancient populations because diets often contain grit from stone processing, soil, or tough material. Teeth may also be used as tools. You grip hide with them. You soften fibers. You hold objects while both hands work elsewhere. Convenient? Yes. Good for dental longevity? Not especially. If a tooth is damaged beyond use, extraction may occasionally become necessary. That is not a pleasant thought, so you may prefer to focus on the fact that humans are remarkably adaptable about chewing. Food can be softened, meat can be cut smaller, broths can reduce the need for strong teeth. Care from others allows people with dental problems to survive long after their mouths stop functioning perfectly. Cold also affects breathing. You inhale air so dry and sharp that your throat tightens. Inside a smoky shelter, another problem begins. Smoke from poorly ventilated fires irritates eyes and lungs. You blink constantly. Your eyes water. A cough develops. Carbon monoxide is invisible and odorless, making it particularly dangerous in enclosed spaces with incomplete combustion. Ancient people do not know its chemistry, but they can certainly observe that some fire arrangements make people sick. A headache, dizziness, weakness, confusion. These may encourage better ventilation even when nobody understands the underlying gas. One scandalous aside is that prehistoric shelters may sometimes have been far smokier than almost any modern person would tolerate voluntarily. Your clothes would reek. Your eyes might sting regularly. Your hair would collect soot. The phrase cozy winter evening takes on a flexible definition when the alternative is freezing. Still, people can learn to manage airflow. Openings are adjusted. Fuel choice changes smoke production. The fire may be moved. People learn where to sleep in relation to the hearth. Small improvements matter because exposure repeats night after night. Respiratory infections remain dangerous. Cold weather itself does not magically create infection, but crowded shelter, smoke irritation, poor nutrition, and close contact can make illness harder to endure. You hear someone coughing beside you. At first it is occasional. Later it becomes deeper. Their breathing grows laboured. Their appetite fades. Now the group must decide how much energy can be devoted to care. A sick person needs warmth, fluids, food, rest. All of those require resources. Compassion has a material cost. Yet supporting the sick also preserves members of the community who may recover and contribute again. There is no agreement among scholars on how organized prehistoric healing practices become, or how much specialized medical knowledge particular groups possess. Some researchers emphasize evidence of survival after severe trauma as a sign of sophisticated caregiving. Others caution that healing alone does not prove the existence of dedicated healers or formal medical roles. Arguments split over how much can reasonably be inferred from bones. A healed injury tells you someone survives. It does not tell you exactly who treated them, what rituals were performed, or whether anyone in the group was recognized as a medical specialist. Still, practical care is difficult to deny. You watch someone clean a wound, another person brings warmed liquid, a third keeps the injured individual from walking too soon. No title is necessary for useful treatment. Accidents become especially dangerous during travel. Ice disguises uneven ground. Snow conceals holes. A frozen river can fail. A falling branch can strike unexpectedly. Sharp tools become harder to control when hands are numb. Even simple fatigue increases mistakes. You begin to understand why winter survival depends so heavily on prevention. Do not let your feet stay wet. Do not ignore numbness. Do not travel blindly into worsening weather. Do not place a sleeping person too near flame. Do not consume unknown plants because hunger has made everything look friendly. Do not continue walking on a badly injured ankle simply because you dislike admitting weakness. These rules may never be spoken as commandments. They exist as habits. Habit is ancient safety equipment. Clothing must also be checked for dampness. Sweat creates its own danger. Work too hard in heavy insulation, and your body produces moisture. Stop moving, and that moisture cools. A person who becomes sweaty during travel can become dangerously chilled later. So you regulate effort. Open a garment briefly. Slow your pace. Remove a layer before heavy work if conditions allow. Add it again when you stop. Ancient people who survive cold climates repeatedly would become keenly aware of such changes. The body provides immediate feedback. Comfort itself becomes information. Shivering tells you heat loss is increasing. Loss of shivering in a severely cold person may be especially alarming. Confusion is worse. Hypothermia can affect judgment before the victim fully understands what is happening. Someone who insists they are fine may no longer be reliable. That creates an important social safeguard. Other people can notice what you cannot. Your speech changes. Your movements slow. You make poor decisions. A companion recognizes the pattern and intervenes. Once again, human survival depends on being observed. Solitude removes that protection. Near the end of a bitter day, you examine your feet. The skin is pale in places but intact. You dry them thoroughly. A damaged area receives extra protection. A sore spot is treated before it becomes an open wound. This attention may feel almost dull compared with hunting giant animals, yet dull maintenance keeps people alive. Survival is full of unglamorous rituals. Dry the feet, check the hands, clean the cut, support the ankle, warm the sick person, move the sleeper away from smoke. Small corrections prevent large disasters. The sounds around you soften as people settle. Someone coughs once, then falls quiet. A bandaged hand rests against warm hide. An injured leg remains supported. Nothing here resembles a hospital. There are no instruments gleaming beneath bright light, no written diagnosis, no shelves of medicine. There is only observation, memory, improvisation, and care. Yet those things matter. A body in winter is fragile in dozens of ordinary ways. Ancient humans survive because they learn to notice those weaknesses early and respond with whatever knowledge and materials they possess. You flex your fingers again. Sensation has returned. It hurts slightly. That is good. You close your hand, pull the covering tighter, and let warmth continue doing its patient work. The strangest thing about the frozen world is that it never truly becomes friendly. The wind does not soften because humans have learned to endure it. The glaciers do not retreat out of respect. A winter night remains capable of killing the careless, the unlucky, and sometimes even the highly skilled. Yet human beings continue spreading through environments that seem almost designed to reject them. That is the real puzzle. You stand beneath a pale sky and look across an immense cold plain. Nothing about your body seems especially impressive compared with the animals surrounding you. A mammoth carries its insulation everywhere. A reindeer has fur, powerful legs, and instincts tuned to seasonal movement. A wolf possesses a coat, teeth, speed, and an excellent nose. You possess relatively bare skin, modest strength, and feet that become painfully cold. On paper, this is not an encouraging competition, But humans do something unusual. They change the rules. Instead of waiting for the body to evolve thick fur, you make insulation from another animal's skin. Instead of waiting for stronger jaws, you shape cutting edges from stone. Instead of growing claws, you manufacture points. Instead of developing night vision, you create light. Instead of relying only on instinct, you teach detailed knowledge to people who were not born with it. Culture begins doing work that biology would otherwise have to do. Records confirm that prehistoric humans repeatedly occupy regions marked by dramatic climatic instability. Cold phases intensify, warmer intervals arrive, grasslands expand and contract, forests move, animal populations shift their ranges. The successful human response is not perfect adaptation to one single environment, it is flexibility. You can live beside rivers, you can exploit open steppe, you can use caves, you can construct dwellings where caves do not exist, you can hunt large animals, you can turn towards smaller foods when large prey becomes unreliable. That flexibility is more powerful than specialization when the world refuses to remain stable. A species perfectly adapted to one narrow set of conditions can thrive beautifully until those conditions disappear. Humans are less elegant. You improvise. And improvisation can be astonishingly effective. Imagine a tool breaking in your hand. The stone point snaps near its base. For an animal depending on a broken natural weapon, this would be a serious problem. For you, it becomes an afternoon repair. The damage point can sometimes be reshaped. If it cannot, another can be made, a broken shaft can be replaced. Bindings can be renewed. Components can be separated and reused. Your technology is modular long before anyone uses the word. That gives you resilience. You do not need every object to last forever. You need the knowledge required to remake it. This is why a human group can arrive in a new landscape carrying surprisingly little. What matters is not merely the equipment in your hands. It is the invisible library in your heads. You know that one stone fractures predictably, another crumbles, one kind of wood bends, another splits, one animal provides excellent sinew, another provides especially useful hide, one valley shelters against wind, another becomes dangerous when snow deepens. This information accumulates through generations. Memory becomes technology. A curious footnote is that prehistoric people sometimes travel considerable distances to obtain particular stone, rather than simply using whatever lies nearby. That choice suggests discrimination. Not all rocks are equal. High-quality flint, chert, obsidian, and other suitable materials can make tool production more predictable. You may carry a good stone core across great distances because you know exactly what it can become. There is something wonderfully human about this. Even tens of thousands of years ago, someone probably looks at a perfectly adequate local rock and thinks, "No, I prefer the good material from over there." Standards have entered the Ice Age. Innovation also spreads socially. One person discovers a better way to shape a point. Another watches. A child learns. A neighboring group encounters the technique. Soon an idea can travel farther than the person who first developed it. This is one of humanity's most important advantages. Useful behavior does not have to be reinvented in every generation. It can accumulate. A slightly better cutting edge joins an improved sewing method. A better route joins a more effective hunting technique. A more secure binding joins improved food preparation. Small improvements stack. Nothing needs to be revolutionary on its own. Given enough generations, ordinary refinements can transform what humans are capable of surviving. Scholars bicker over exactly when this cumulative culture becomes distinctively powerful in Homo sapiens, and whether other human species possess comparable capacities. Neanderthals clearly create complex tools, use fire, exploit difficult environments, and transmit skills. They are not mindless creatures waiting for replacement. The debate concerns degree, population structure, rates of innovation, and how widely knowledge circulates. Some researchers emphasize larger social networks among Homo sapiens. Others focus on demographic advantages, ecological flexibility, or differences in technology. No agreement has been reached on one grand explanation for why some human populations persist while others disappear. The temptation is to search for a single winning invention. Perhaps better weapons, perhaps better clothing, perhaps language, perhaps wider trade networks. Reality is probably messier. Survival may depend on combinations. A warmer garment matters more when people can repair it. A good weapon matters more when hunters know animal roots. Stored food matters more when communities agree to share it. A distant contact matters more when people can communicate useful information. Human advantages reinforce one another. That creates a system stronger than any individual piece. Population size may matter too. A very small, isolated community is vulnerable to bad luck. Several deaths can remove rare skills. A disease outbreak can reduce numbers sharply. A poor hunting season can become catastrophic. Larger connected populations can buffer those shocks. People move between groups, partnerships form, knowledge travels, materials circulate. A local disaster does not necessarily destroy the entire network. This is not immortality. Groups still vanish. Settlements are abandoned. People die during hard winters. Entire regional populations can decline. But connection gives recovery more paths. One scandalous aside is that prehistoric networking may sometimes have involved exactly the same uncomfortable social duties familiar today. Visitors arrive, food must be shared, relationships must be maintained. Someone important talks too long. You remain polite because future cooperation may depend on it. Human diplomacy is probably older than chairs, and those relationships can matter when climate suddenly turns against you. A distant group may know where animals have moved. They may allow temporary access to territory. They may provide mates, materials, or information. The social world becomes a map of possible refuge. You begin to see why ancient survival cannot be understood only by examining objects. The most important tools may be relationships. A spear point preserves beautifully. Trust does not. Yet trust can determine whether the person carrying that spear point is fed when their own hunt fails. There is another advantage hidden inside human curiosity. You investigate. A new landscape is not merely threatening, it is examined. What grows here? Where does water collect? Which animals pass through? Which stone can be worked? Where does snow melt earliest? Curiosity can look like unnecessary risk, and sometimes it certainly is. Someone has to be the first person to taste an unfamiliar plant, which is a career path with mixed outcomes. But exploration expands the range of possible solutions. Humans learn by testing the environment. Successful discoveries are remembered. Failures are remembered too, sometimes with greater enthusiasm. Do not eat that berry. Do not camp beneath that slope. Do not cross that ice in early spring. Negative knowledge is still knowledge. Stories may help preserve such warnings. A tale about a dangerous place can carry geographic information. A story about an animal can contain behavioral observations. A ritual associated with a season may help coordinate movement or resource use. Modern categories such as myth, science, practical instruction, and entertainment may overlap in ways that feel unfamiliar. For the listener, the important question is not whether a story sounds scientifically precise. It is whether it helps people remember what matters. The cold world rewards memorable knowledge. Art may belong to this wider human system as well. Ice Age people carve figures, decorate objects, use pigments, create beads, and produce extraordinary images. Not every mark has a practical survival function. That is precisely what makes it interesting. Humans living under severe environmental pressure still devote effort to symbols and beauty. This suggests that survival is not merely mechanical. Identity matters. Belonging matters. Shared meaning matters. A group held together by common practices may cooperate more effectively, though proving such connections archaeologically is difficult. Perhaps decoration signals affiliation. Perhaps ritual strengthens trust. Perhaps art simply gives pleasure. A life worth maintaining contains more than calories. That is easy to forget when imagining the Ice Age only as an endless emergency. People laugh, children play, adults decorate things. Someone tells a story badly. Someone else has heard it many times. A person falls in love. Another gets jealous. Life continues in all its inconvenient complexity. The cold is serious. It is not the only thing people experience. Then the climate changes again. Glaciers advance in some periods and retreat in others. Habitats shift. Species disappear from certain regions. The people who survive best are often those able to change behavior before old strategies fail completely. This is adaptability in its most important form, not cleverness for its own sake. Responsiveness. You notice. You discuss. You adjust. That sequence becomes a quiet engine of survival. Modern humans eventually settle environments from high mountains to Arctic coasts, deserts, forests, islands, and grasslands. Your biological body remains recognizably human across all of them. What changes dramatically is culture. Clothing changes, food changes, shelter changes, tools change, movement changes, knowledge changes. You do not evolve a new species for every climate. You build a new way of living. That may be the most extraordinary answer to the winter question. Ancient humans do not defeat cold. They become experts at creating small pockets of survivable conditions inside it. A garment creates one pocket, a dwelling creates another, a social group creates another. Stored knowledge creates one that cannot be seen at all. Together, those pockets overlap until a landscape once barely tolerable becomes home. You look across the snow again. The wind is still there. The cold is still immense. Human beings remain physically vulnerable. And yet vulnerability has produced cooperation, invention, caution, curiosity, and memory. You survive not because you become stronger than winter. You survive because you become better at learning from it. The pale horizon slowly loses its sharpness. Footprints cross the snow and disappear into distance. Some belong to hunters, some to children, some to people carrying tools, food, stories, and remembered routes. None of them know that distant generations will someday wonder how they managed to live here. To them, this is simply life. Difficult, uncertain, familiar life. And step by step, winter by winter, humans keep going. The frozen plain can soften now. The wind grows quieter until it is only a distant movement somewhere beyond the edge of thought. The footprints fade beneath fresh snow, not erased so much as gently covered. You no longer need to follow them. There is nowhere else you need to travel tonight. The people of that ancient winter continue without you, carrying their knowledge beneath a pale sky, tending to one another, watching the weather, and waking to another cold morning. Your own room feels warmer by comparison. The weight beneath you is steady. The air is calm. Nothing is required from you now. You can allow those distant fires, shelters, trails, voices, and snowy horizons to blur together into one soft image. Thousands of winters have passed. The cold has come and gone countless times. For this moment, you are safe, still, and comfortably far from the frozen plain. Let the last traces of wind fade. Let the darkness settle, and sleep.